It's like moving house. Thank you, everybody, for coming out in such amazing numbers this evening. I am so glad there wasn't a Lewis strike, and I'm so glad it didn't rain, and I'm so glad for all of those things. But above everything, I'm actually so glad to be part of the community that I see around me. A community of writers who are also friends, family who sometimes are friends, and it's just great to have something to celebrate in days that sometimes can feel very dark for all of us. I particularly want to thank Leah and Tricia for those very generous words, to Dubray for hosting the launch this evening, to Davy and all of the team at Macmillan. They really are a force to be reckoned with. Cormac Kinsella, to, I hope I get this right, Maximiliano Roveri, who's taking photographs from my website and who's a dream to work with, and to my agent Nicola Barr, who has managed the extraordinary feat of strong-arming a US publisher to buy this book.
Hear, hear.
That's the lady over there we need to buy a drink for. Nicola and her colleague in New York, Grania Fox, have done wonderful work, and I'm extremely grateful to both of them. So here we are, International Women's Day 2016, and I am very happy to be able to launch the stories of both Calista and Pilar and to send them out into the world with all of our good wishes. I've always been fascinated by mythology, Greek, Irish, any. And I remember years ago I came across a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. And he deals with mythology, and basically what he does is he looks at how mythology, like all stories, all tell us something about what it is to be human and how to navigate our way in an increasingly complex world. I suppose the years that followed, though, is, if you like, the heroine with a thousand faces, because we often don't get to hear the voices of women throughout all of the mythological tales. Mary Beard, the Oxford professor who's endlessly fascinating on this, writes about the silencing of women's voices in the public sphere in the ancient world. So here's my revenge. This is where the modern women get to tell their own stories. So this book, as Leah has said, was actually inspired to excavate the point of view of the other, in this case, the women, in the retelling of an ancient tale. And instead of hearing about the king, Agamemnon, you see, Tricia, I get it wrong too, and his exploits during the Trojan War, I imagined what it would have been like to be his long-suffering wife, Clytemnestra. First as the victim who endured his brutality to her and to all around them, but secondly to watch that victim transform herself into a dangerous woman bent on revenge. In the years that followed, I have changed, you'll be glad to hear, Agamemnon's name to Alexandros. It's a little bit less of a mouthful. And Clytemnestra becomes Calista. The years that follows also looks at what happens when we make a decision or a choice that turns out not to have been in our own best interest. And the very short extract I'm going to read for you in a moment looks at one of the first meetings between Alexandros and Calista. She is 17, he is 30. And in the story, I explore what happens to each of them when they follow their decision to be together. Once again, many thanks to all of you for coming this evening. Please join us for a drink in Neary's afterwards when we finish up here. And this, I suppose, I've chosen this extract because what I wanted to show with it was our capacity, sometimes an endless capacity for denial and refusal to see all of the dangers that might lie ahead when we make a particular choice. Sorry, just a quick drink of water. Okay, so this is their very early date. Everything about the Trocadero restaurant thrills Calista. The unfamiliar ambience, the candles, the white linen tablecloths, the deferential and unobtrusive waiters. This is the 1960s. She is sure too that she can spot several famous faces from the Dublin stage. Last week, her father Timothy had insisted on taking the family to the Queen's Theatre in Pearse Street to see The Shadow of a Gunman. Part of your heritage, he'd said, you should get to know O'Casey. Callista thought that her mother, Maria Luisa, had been bewildered by the play, but she and her brother Philip had both been starstruck. But why, her mother had asked at the interval, why must we always see the violence? And Timothy had looked exasperated. The play is part of the commemoration of the 1916 Rising, my dear. His voice had had an unaccustomed sharpness. Our children need to understand the history of their country, violence and all. Maria Luisa had been silent for the rest of the evening. Tonight, Callista is amazed to find herself in a restaurant such as this, looking as though she dines out surrounded by famous people every night of her life, looking as though she belongs. Alexandros smiles at her, amused. The waiter arrives, murmurs a greeting, places menus on the table in front of them. He starts to say something about the evening specials, but Callista no longer hears him. A young man has just approached their table. He's tall, fair-haired, well-dressed. He's also clearly tipsy. Callista can see him draw nearer over Alexandros' left shoulder. He leers at her, his unsteady gaze somewhere below her neckline. Callista blushes, looks away as he passes. Alexandros is watching her. What's wrong, he asks, his hand covering hers. She shakes her head. Nothing, she says, it's just I think that man is a bit drunk. Alexandros pats her hand. His eyes narrow as he watches the man move away from them. Don't worry, he says. I will protect you. Some instinct makes Callista hold her tongue. She feels a crackle in the air, an electrical current that has turned into something as lethal as desire. The tipsy young man walking back again has just now stopped at their table. Callista does not need to look up. She can feel his presence like a cold sigh across her forearm. The hairs on her arm lift. She sees the instant arrival of gooseflesh and she is afraid. My compliments, the younger man slurs at Alexandros. You are in the company of the loveliest woman in the room. He reaches out one hand. His fingertips graze Callista's bare shoulder. She flinches, draws back from his touch. Alexandros ignites. He suddenly towers over her, over the tipsy man at her side, over the waiter, and then things get confused. The table leaves the floor miraculously, scattering wine glasses, flowers, cutlery, shards of glass stun the air. And then there is blood on her dress, on the white linen napkin that lies across her knees, on Alexandros' knuckles. In the scuffle, Callista cannot tell who is who. The waiters hurl themselves into the fray. She sees them try to separate the two flailing men, although Alexandros' punches seem to land with a lot more accuracy than the younger man's. And then she's at the door. They are both at the door, Alexandros' rage still flaming. He drags her back to the car. He says not one word until he has pushed her into the passenger seat. Don't ever, ever again look at another man while you are with me, he says. His grip on her wrist is painful, a burning sensation that frightens her. I didn't, she sobs. I did nothing. 1 minute he was nowhere and the next he was standing there beside me. I don't even know where he came from. Alexandros releases his hold on her. He cups her chin with one hand, shakes his head, sorrowful at her lack of understanding. This is how much I care for you, he says, how much I love you. No other man has the right. He grips the steering wheel. You must never do that again. And he starts the car. Callista cannot speak. So this is what love is. This is how true love feels. All that she has just seen now means something new, something that has been transformed, transmuted, translated into an exciting and unfamiliar language. The fists, the blood, the brawl, these are now tokens of Alexandros' enduring love, of his protection, precious talismans of his devotion. Timidly, Callister reaches out, touches his hand. I love you too. Alexandros turns and looks at her, but his eyes don't seem to know who she is or where she comes from. Then he nods. Remember, he says, you belong to me. If anybody wants a book signed, if there's a danger of that, I'm here on the stand.